I see. Wait, all the other regular nights.
Circle. Where it's looking at the recruiter schedules. Circling thing is part of the membership. Yeah. Got it.
Oh no! It needs approval by an admin.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, fuck that one up.
Should I call her and tell her to approve it?
Yeah. That's okay. We'll.
Oh, okay.
That's a special spot.
And make me an admin?
Yeah.
Hey, can you go approve my post on School Anywhere?
That's great. Perfect for you somehow.
Well, he just asked me to do it, but I'm not an admin, so it has to be approved.
She can do it as well if that's better.
Got it. Cool. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, and it's sure.
You want to sit by the door, or you want to do it?
You put your leg.
And I guess if you want to make me an admin, that would be
Oh, I see. That's why you got that close.
And at work.
Yeah.
He's excavating now. It's sort of already.
Yeah, no,
That's right.
there's something about.
Yeah, you know.
You do. Yeah. Office job.
Yeah.
You like it, it's like, wow.
I don't have. But I do like
And I spent my whole life as a dog, but I think I'm actually.
I have no idea whether this microphone is working at all.
Is it broadcasting?
Yeah, I can send you a link. It's a good idea.
Watch for feedback then. Yeah.
No, actually, it's. I'm just not gonna worry about it.
Yeah, it's pretty relaxed.
Well, I'll just check it afterwards and I'll figure it out later. It's okay if it doesn't. I'll have to give it time again. It's really, who knows what good. I am ready to begin.
Yay!
All right. Welcome. A few of you haven't been to this section before, so I'll give you a quick heads up. I'm basically going to talk for the next hour. We'll have some interaction in like the Q&A form, and there's still like an ethos of circling where I'll be trying to speak into your listening, as a fair guy would say. Always speaking into it, listening. And I know a lot, but I'm also discovering stuff as we go. So like it really helps to have your questions and your challenges. And like, hey, hold on, what the hell? This is an exploration for me as well. This is also a new orientation so far. I kind of like it. What do you guys think?
I like it too.
Yeah, and you're happy like all the way over there?
I don't know yet.
Okay. Feel free to switch around if you're. So good to see you. There's another thing that I've been, as those who've been before, I'm like working on my speaking. I'm like working on getting key takeaways because I always say like really, I feel like I say lots of complex stuff. It's like really hard to like make much sense of. I'm gonna try to make this theoretical, but also related to circling, but also related to like what you can actually take home and do with your life, like why this might be meaningful. So one key takeaway I'll say that this is going to be about is becoming aware. And as a result, having more choice. We'll come back in that. The other thing is that some of this comes from just my own personal pet peeves and about certain things in life, but like actually there's beauty in everything, I think. And so we'll keep looking for the beauty of that. I'll also be referencing stages of development, and if you guys don't know integral theory, then consider this like a footnote. You don't have to know the theory to like get meaning from the talk, but those who do, the expert reader, will probably get something out of me referencing like colors or stage names, which may not make much sense to you. Does that make sense? Great. Awesome. So, I'm going to report on this thing as well. That's okay, we won't use that one. So that was not a good color anyway. So, I think there's this thing that happens where we take a certain way of being. We're just going to, that's too hard. Yeah, exactly. And there's like a great thing that comes from it. And then when we take it to a certain extreme, it gets really not good, right? This is obvious, like ice cream is great, but if you eat too much ice cream, it's horrible. I don't know if you've ever tried to eat too much ice cream. Ben and Jerry's, anyone? Okay. So, for example, if you take a very traditional way of being, I think something great that comes from this is law and order. Like the trains run on time. And for example, one time, the Netherlands is like really well known for having trains that run on time and things like this. And one time I was going to the climbing gym and I was 30 cents, euro cents short of like the cash I needed to climb. And I was like, well, can't you just like, this is like a few years ago, I was like, can't you just like count me as a student? Like they had a $2 discount for a student. I'm like, well, are you a student? And of course, like my own law and order thing, I was like, I'm a student of life. And they were like, no, we can't give you a discount. And I was like, but like I have to bike all the way home to get, and they're like, well, there's an ATM like at the store 2 miles away or whatever, 2 kilometers away, honestly. And like I had to actually bike, and then I like got it and changed just to spite them. I was like, count all this change. But anyway, like this, the law and order, when it gets really extreme, it becomes fundamentalism. So there's a beautiful aspect, and then there's a kind of extreme version. We're not going to spend much time on. Everyone's pretty well familiar with this. Come on in. Come on in. Next example to just keep filling and fleshing. Oh, this would be amber or blue in developmental theory. You also have something like modernism, a way of being that like looks at the world objectively. That says, let's study things with science. Let's draw conclusions. Let's be rational about this. When it goes too far, I would say it becomes materialism or objectifying. It's an extreme version of modernism. And I think we all have a sense of this. Like everyone in this room, at least, it's like, yeah, it kind of sucks when like you make everything into an object, you make everything into a point of data, and you kind of forget the humanity. You forget to look people in the eyes. All relationships are transactional. This cuts you in life like kind of empty and devoid of meaning. And it's like you can get into this really deep depression. I don't know if anyone here has done that, but for example, this is an issue. So I'd say this is like, it's actually the same consciousness that creates like all of like the joys of like the modern world, like ends up in its extreme form into materialism. Enter the title of the talk, which I've called Communiterialism, Growthism, and the Tyranny of Surrender. So now we're going to fill out this developmental chart. So this is orange in developmental theory. So now I'd say like the next major movement we could call pluralism. What would you say is one defining feature of what's great about pluralism? Anyone? I can just tell you what I think. Equality, exactly, yeah. Equality, which I'm going to go for like inclusion. That's one way to say it. Equality, it's all the same. Basic thing, justice. Essentially, there's this kind of sense of like, hey, like humans are humans. It's almost a response to the extremism of this. It's like man, we all have a right to be who we are, right? And like this is really big in circling, right? Like we're like, hey, you've got a point of view, it's different from mine. We can all be included. And like we sometimes people will be like, yeah, everything's welcome, or there's like no rules. Like there's no rules except there's no rules, which is a rule. Let's toss that out for a second. I would never say that. I'm not going to say there's no rules. You'll not hear that from me because I don't think it's true. Also, I don't think it's anyway. If we take the inclusion thing too far, I think one extreme is what I would call communitarialism. And I think one way to think of this, oh god, that's going to be problematic, is that there's this kind of basic formula that all of these like worldviews or these ways of thinking are trying to fill out. And it's like, if we have enough, oh god, you guys got the point. There's the Dutch influence right there. If we have enough blank, all of our problems will be solved. All our base are belong to us. So the idea is like, if we have enough law and order, all of our problems will be solved. But that creates fundamentalism. If we have enough objectivity, all of our problems will be solved. But that creates materialism. If we have enough inclusion, all of our problems will be solved. Does anyone, can you feel where that feels like true? You've probably said that today. Like I've probably said that today. If we could just include more of whatever, what you're feeling inside yourself, of like, then like everything will be all right. If we could just include all the perspectives at the table, like we'd be fine. If we could just, I don't know, yeah. But I think so. Like I'm saying, communitarialism as a kind of poke at a pet peeve. Like if we just have enough community, all of our problems will be solved. So what we need to do is like build more community and like let's come together and like and it's really seductive because I think there is, as a result of like this, or like there's been a kind of like throwing away of the community or like communities. I mean, there's a huge fucking problem. There's like an erosion of being part of something. I am here like leading people in connecting and all this stuff, and I like maybe have. I mean, my sister lives next door on one side, but like the other neighbor, I don't even know. This one guy's name was behind me. Like I know the names of people across the street, but I don't know if I have their phone numbers. So like there's something like where we actually do, just like we need law and order for like the trains to run on time, we do actually need like objective views to like understand the third person point of view in the world. Like we do need inclusion, we do need equality, we do need community. But if we go too far, I think it becomes the exact same thing as these. If we get it, it's like you basically are going to solve all your problems through accumulation of more, insert the blank, accumulation of more material goods. I mean, we all know people who do that. Probably like our parents or ourselves, like retail therapy. And then like if we accumulate enough community, we'll finally be all here. Are we good so far? Any questions? Any challenges?
The extremes for the first two make sense how that would be bad, but I don't see how it would be bad.
You don't see it would be bad if you had too much. Okay, great. That's a great question. I have some notes I've prepared for you.
I have a thought.
Let's hear it.
So with the materialism, we get to kind of a transactional nature. With this, if we go to just a pure relational, where there is no transactional aspect of it, it gets kind of weird on how do you actually, it's like it sort of meshes together. It sort of becomes a mishmash of how do you actually distinguish, when something is done, or there's something in that feels like that's the
Like what happens to accountability?
Like works? Like, in Star Trek.
Yeah.
I think that's one issue for sure.
Yeah.
Is that you're trying to create diversity, but you end up with like, oh God, since community is supposed to be the thing that solves everything, if we don't fit in the community, like I basically don't exist. I don't have any value. I don't have anything. So I've got to like actually conform, and you end up like being a total conformist in the name of like this like high-minded pluralism. You like drop down to like a much more like basic way of being a
The
human.
dissolution of the individual.
Yeah, that's ironically, again, we're trying to include more individuality, and we end up in the extreme version, like excluding individuals, because what happens if they don't include, which everyone in some form or fashion doesn't. Another thing is like you might have seen like, oh, if you only date like within inside a particular community, we've probably all seen that, like within circling, within, I don't know, some other communities we're a part of, it gets pretty fucked up. And then you add in like these like post-conventional poly relationships, and then it's like super fucked up, right? Like, and then like one person gets in a fight, and like the whole thing is like, you know, the whole community itself is like a boiling pot of like ancient wounds and like weird projective bullshit, right? And it's like I have to laugh because it's so uncomfortable because it feels so true. I'm like, who am I shitting on right now? But like in some ways it's really simple. It's like don't only date within inside your one community. Like that's hard because again there's this breakdown. So what are you gonna do? Like date people you work with? That's problematic. Like where are you gonna meet people if you're not meeting them like in a school or at your, do we have civic centers? Like you meet them at circling.
Can you flesh that out for me? I don't understand the issue with dating on the inside.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with one person or a few people. Like I love that people meet each other in circling and date and break up and it all is fine. But when it's too insular, it basically just feels like being in like high school or something to me. But it's usually even smaller. It's like being in like a small town high school. And I think what happens is that people sacrifice truth for convenience. Yeah.
It reminds me of like of an extreme version of a friend of mine from India who like his parents only want him to marry a woman like from their neighborhood, like not even like 4 blocks over. Like he can't marry a woman from there.
And we could actually very easily say there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, except this value is trying to include. And what it's doing is excluding anyone that's not in the in-group. So I would be very happy saying, look, there's just absolutely nothing wrong with only dating within your community, but just own it. Don't say this is like an inclusive community if that's the fact of what's happening. Don't pretend like your value is inclusion because it's not. It's about creating sameness, which is totally fine. I fucking love sameness. I really do. I also love difference. And the problem, I think the real problem is just like when this value goes to the extreme. If we have enough inclusion, all of our problems will be solved. Some other examples of this, like if we have enough, like it's basically like think of the problems. If we have enough community, my loneliness will be solved. But then again, like because of this weird like paradox thing, usually it ends up being really lonely, and like you don't end up solving your loneliness. You drive yourself deeper into loneliness. And of course, one of the things we try to combat this with in circling is to say, actually to really genuinely welcome loneliness and like try to really genuinely welcome difference. But in order to welcome difference, we have to also welcome conflict. We have to welcome like discomfort. We try to do this by saying like, yeah, we do have a community, but it's a practice community. Like, I love it when people in the circling community, your shirt is really freaky. I just saw it. Look at that. For those who can't see it, it's like The Shining just staring at you. But yeah. I forgot. It must not have been important. Anyway, you'll get the
I have a
point.
question.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I'm not sure if you're framing this in this way, so I want to ask. Do you see these as mutually exclusive? Because I could see how you could hold maybe 2 of these at a time, actually. or more?
I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I see it as a kind of a spectrum that like we move through in different moments and different times. And yeah, and I think you can, like the ideal version is like to become aware and have choice. To become aware that you're like trying to solve all your problems with a thing and how that becomes an ism. And you can actually still double down on it. Like, yeah, like that's, I mean, in terms of like dating in the community, like become aware, like this could be the most awesome thing in my world. And I definitely want to do it. Like, how great is it that you can bring your partner to circle and blah, 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 are de facto becoming a little bit more insulated. And that's really okay. Like, I think there's really good things about that. But it's just acknowledging the choice of that. And then like there's like the kind of Facebook echo chamber thing. Remember, I don't know if any of you were like Trump voters, but if you weren't, you were probably surprised when Trump won, right? Who was surprised when Trump won? Yeah, exactly. Because like the vast majority of the people you spend time with all basically think like you do, and this is fine. This is like the human condition. Like the fact that we can even think about people not thinking different from us is actually an incredible wonder of the modern world. Nevertheless, like I think this kind of like communitarialism creates echo chambers. I think stuff like Facebook structurally creates echo chambers without intending to. Like nobody in Facebook was like, let's create an echo chamber where like people can share fake news and like be really like unaligned with actual factual things in the world. Like they were like, hey, you know what'd be cool is if you like saw your friend's news feeds and, oh, you know what sucks? This is really overwhelming. So let's show only the friends that you are most interested in. You know, it's a very innocent way of like doing inclusion and trying to come up with rankings, but then it kind of structurally created this ism that I think is worth becoming aware of and having choice over. A few other examples would be, this thing about like, I've seen a few different people try to lead whatever type of like personal growth group or meditation community or even circling communities. And they actually want a community, and that's why they started. And they almost, without fail, end up outside. Like they always feel separate from that community because they're the leader and they get all this weird projections and all this stuff. And so a few years down the line, they're like, they might even have a thriving like circling group, but they're like even more lonely than ever because they created all this stuff for other people they don't get to partake in. I did this. I did this before Circle. I did this with an integral group and a Course in Miracles group. And it was cool. It like trained my chops for like leading groups. And I did this for like almost 10 years. But then when I started leading circling groups in Austin, I just never thought it was going to like solve my community needs. Like, I think we do have a need to be a part of something. But like, I was just like, yeah, this is not what this is for. This is a practice community for us to grow and practice this thing together. And like, I'm going to continue to play like board games at Vigilantes with my, friends that I met at the integral group. And like, I hang out with my family and whatever, that kind of thing. And I do have community that like formed naturally over time, which is beautiful and I love, but I think I was able to like narrowly escape that trap because I fell into it like a couple of times before. Another version of this, and then I'll stop on this one, we'll go to the next one, is let's just crowdsource it. Yeah. Okay. Did I explain that well enough? I should have done it in green. Because this is green. Oh well.
When you said you escaped the trap, could you say more about that? How did you do that? No.
How did I escape the trap? I didn't think that this was going to solve my problems. Just the same way of like, I still buy stuff, but I don't think purchasing some other product is going to solve my problem. And so people were complaining about the sound not being good in giving these talks, and so I like bought a microphone. And so in a certain sense, it's going to solve that problem. But I'm not like, now that I've got a microphone, like suddenly these talks are going to become wildly popular and the studio is going to become massively successful and have like thousands of members. And there is some like fantasy part of me that dreams that, right? So the same is going to be true of like this, like some part of me is like, oh yeah, if this studio has, you know, 1,000 members, then like I have this great robust community and all going to weddings and like baby showers and I don't know, like
Sounds like nightmare to me.
right, or whatever you're into, like, oh great, now we have lots of like sex parties or something. I don't know, like yeah, like there's obviously a range of like what that community means, but that's not what this is about. Just to be abundantly clear.
Something else too about if it is to solve your community needs, there's something like it feels like you invest all of your time in some way. That problem of not being a member of the community because you're organizing, you're kind of outside of it.
Yeah.
The more you do that, the more you're outside. It's kind of this weird thing. And
does that answer your question, or does that give you some handles that you can inquire on? Do you want more handles? Can you give some more personal?
Well, I'm
A
just
few
thinking,
words.
my context is like I was a part of a community for 9 years. It was like part of the inner circle, and I saw that happen with me, where there's like wanting to include, and maybe this is an extreme word, but it felt like it was kind of incestuous.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, I've been involved in different communities like ecstatic dance and certainly not particularly in Dallas. And I don't know, it just is on my mind. Like I don't want to create what had been before. So it's not like completely something I'm seeking after, but because you were talking about it, I'm curious. And especially when you said, you know, that you broke out of that trap, I'm like, oh, how did you do that?
Yeah, maybe I should add something about like becoming aware and having choice, and like rendering unto Caesar what's Caesar's, and render unto God what's God's. You guys know that old quote from Jesus? One of my faves. So at some point, I don't remember what happened. The like disciples are like asking Jesus about paying taxes, because they're like, I don't remember exactly, but I think they're basically like hoping he's going to be like, nah, you don't have to pay taxes because you're like too spiritual. And he's like, no, you give unto Caesar what's Caesar's, which was like Caesar was the king of the day, or the emperor or whatever. So he's like basically like pay your taxes because that's of this world, and then give your prayers to God about the spiritual world. Like keep them separate. Don't try to make your faith in in divinity being like this kind of radiant, empty everything in every moment. Like the kingdom, in Jesus' words, it's like the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's here. It's right now. It has nothing to do with taxes or Caesar. And like it's there it's at hand. It's right here. It's there in the taxes and in the Caesar. So it's the same thing. Like render unto Caesar. It's like, you know, when you need like law and order, like do law and order. When you need like something you have to, you know, buy or like study objectively, do that. When you need community, when you need inclusion, like use the wisdom of that and only use it for that. Don't make it something else that it's not meant to be. Don't try to fit it somewhere that it doesn't fit. Does that make sense?
So the shift that you can make to not be in the extreme in any of the cases is always subjective. It's always the becoming aware. So the shift is always the same from gray to extreme, no matter which one.
Yeah, and actually, one way to make it is, why don't we say this makes it, I think you're pointing out something really interesting. It's not just, you become aware, but it's not just having choice, it's you realize that you're always making a choice.
Every day.
In any given moment,
You're
yeah.
right.
And so now it's not just like how I am and how I see the world, but it's also what I do with that habit. So I'm showing up, and that may mean that I say no to certain things. It may mean that like all sorts of people are going to come in and try to like, you know, get me to buy stuff that like so that I can be happier. All sorts of people are going to come in and try to turn this into the thing that's going to fit their like belonging needs. And there may be a choice I make that says no, like we're not going to do that. And I'm going to disappoint people, but I'm like that thing belongs here, not here. Like people are going to try to make this make them not lonely. That's a very common one. And people have even advised me to like advertise circling on Facebook as like, you know, feeling lonely or like come to this. And I'm like, what am I going to say? Feeling lonely? Come here and we're going to like help you feel it way more deeply. Like all that loneliness you've been avoiding that's built up your whole life, like you're going to get to embody the shit out of it and like see it everywhere. Like that's what my advertisement. That's actually the advertisement I've written. There's one on Facebook somewhere. It's like you're probably using your spirituality to bypass your pain, and it's great. And it pisses people off. And they're like, "What?" And they tag their friends and like, "This is bullshit." And I'm like, I explain it better in the like, it's just a bullshit title to get you to click. And I'm like, yes, of course. Render unto Caesar what's Caesar's. What's up?
That you're articulating, and then the extreme of that would be like some type of relativism. So
Yeah.
you can't commit.
Yeah.
So just throwing it out there.
I think that's right. And I think this is the view I'm kind of, the moderation version is become aware and make a choice. Let's see where we go with that. Let's go to the next one. So we're going to call the next one integrated. So if we try to like, what does this mean? Let's say this is like, we're gonna like develop the capacity and skill to like integrate all these, and we're gonna like grow and find our shadows and like heal our ancient, you know, wounding from our childhood, and we're gonna like see all the system and in the modern society, and it's becoming more common and it's coming online a lot for sure in circling. And like circling does a really good job of the inclusion equality piece. It also does a really good job of the development piece, right? Like even though we're like, yeah, we don't need to get anywhere necessarily. Like most people are here because they're like, I want to fucking grow. I want to like evolve. I want to become more conscious. I want to like see my blind spots. I want to find my faults. I want to integrate my shadows. You recognize that? And like, oh yeah, like I'm relating all the time. I'm talking, and so like if I can learn how to have relating grow me, then I can be growing all the fucking time. Isn't that amazing? And it is amazing. And in its extreme, it becomes what I'm calling growthism. If we have enough growth, all of our problems will be solved. Yay! Come to circling. AwesomeCirclingStudio.com. Does this make sense?
I feel seen.
Yes. Good. Yeah. Oh, jeez. Why not? I think that's a very good question, because I mean the truth is like in the beauty side, like this great part, like these just solve a fuck ton of problems. Like I don't want to live in the pre-traditional world. It's like The Walking Dead or something, and like the main characters are dying all the time, and I'm the main character of my story, and I don't want to die all the time. This is like super duper helpful, and it solves a fuck ton of problems. And like this is super duper helpful, and it solves a lot of problems, and it gets rockets to the moon, and all sorts of amazing things. And this solves all sorts of amazing problems. I mean, we're still in this socially, like in a big way. Like I'm calling it communiterialism in this like local sense, but like on a global sense, this is the beauty of this is like man, we want to like elect a female president because we haven't had one, and that's fucked up. And this is like let's include women in leadership more. Like we should definitely do that. And that's solving a really big problem. So no way to want to throw that out. Similarly here, like this development is solving a massive problem that none of these ways of being, ways of thinking, understanding the world could solve on their own. They just haven't been able to. So I think there's all sorts of problems that, like, the inclusion is as amazing of a development in human history as it is. There's things it just can't do for a variety of reasons. I'm not even sure that we know what all those are yet, but I think somewhat like the problems that are like plaguing us right now as a species, like terrorism, global warming, I don't know, like AI safety, different like drug-resistant bacteria. All these things are like problems that I think are like bigger than this kind of thinking can solve. And I think this is somewhat obvious because like mostly the global warming things is an obvious place where like most people who try to solve this are coming from this mentality, and they haven't been able to do it. And like I think Al Gore has been amazing in a lot of ways, and his leadership really touches my heart when I see him speak with people. He seems to be coming from a deep place, but it seems like his main thing is like, we're going to educate people, and like education is wonderful, and it hasn't stemmed the tide. It's not like all the education in the past decade like didn't suddenly see a dip in CO2, and then all the like objective people like, oh, we'll just build whatever, you know, carbon scrubbers, like that hasn't been able to do the trick yet either. Like it seems like we need something more integrated to deal with it. And I think we're training this. I really think we're training this leadership capacity in circling. So we're able to weave these different perspectives together. We mostly focus on interpersonal, but we're really training a capacity to be multi-perspectival and to like be able to shift, like to be able to shift and be like, oh, I can see the world from David's view, and it makes sense that he's making this face and doing these things, and I can do that without at all like losing my position. And so then I can communicate and like build common ground, or like make a big stand and be like, you like it totally makes sense where you're at, and I'm fucking pissed. Totally open heart because of the training that we're doing in this room together and elsewhere. So yeah, I think that this is like growth is hugely important. And like one of you was asking, like, do I see it in like as if these are like discrete steps? And like, no, and we can hold them at one time. And so like there's huge parts of my being that are still in, like if I have enough meditation, all my problems will be solved. That's a common one at this stage. If I'm peaceful enough. And meditation is particularly seductive because it's like, yeah, you can get off the wheel of samsara. But like, I don't know. Maybe that's a different topic for a different day. Let me show some other ones that come out of this growthism. If we just develop enough, people won't suffer. I can be good enough at circling that I can like make sure like my parents get along, and you know, my friends won't be in bad relationships, blah blah blah. Yeah, there's a kind of save the world mentality. If I'm wise enough, if I learn enough about XYZ field of study, then I can like save the world. I can benefit everyone. I can make the world a better place. Yeah, if we build a wide enough system, if we integrate all the sciences and history, it's just kind of like, yeah, we'll just grow and be bigger and better, and like then everything will be all right when we're big enough and badass enough. Does that make sense? Is that, you recognize it?
I kind of feel connected with it if I think about an experience where I get so caught up in growth that I stop taking action. Like I'm so focused on like, if I just get to this next step, then that'll be like the silver bullet, the magic bullet. And then so I never actually end up doing anything or making any difference, like real connected difference.
Right. And the irony is that somebody coming from like this mentality might be out there like I don't know anything about like what mentality like the mobile loaves and fishes people come from, but have you heard of their community first project? Yeah, it's fucking amazing. It's it's like an Austin nonprofit. It's Christian. I don't even know much about it, like the background, but basically they're like, homelessness is like, it's a big thing and there's all sorts of problems with it. So but what they ended up doing was like buying a plot of land outside of Austin because they couldn't do it within the city limits because of zoning and blah, blah, blah. And they built this whole like community. You should just look into it. It's really impressive. It's really cool. And like, yeah, that they're at some point they maybe like stopped getting off like on the development train. They're like, we're just going to help out these homeless people. And it's pretty amazing. And they've made a really big impact. It's a weird example because I can't peg them like somewhere on this map. I just don't know well enough. But there's plenty of people that are doing something like that. That are doing it just because like it's the right thing to do. My aunt and uncle are like very in a lot of ways they're like fundamental Christians, and they adopted 2 orphans from the Ukraine like 20 years ago. And it's like they were in an orphanage in a pretty bad situation, and now they're like growing up in like suburban America, and they're like part of my family. There's something about that where like the actual difference made in human lives is like massive in this case. And it has nothing to do with like developing more, being more capable. Like they're passing on all their like weird beliefs to their kids, like, and all the good stuff too. Tyranny of Surrender. Are we doing good? Should we keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. So another worldview we'll call surrendered leadership. Nobody escapes. And let's say some like one great, I'm just picking like one out of this whole worldview, we're going to pick like one thing. We'll go with equality because that came from Eric and I like that. So like one thing would be that's amazing about this is like giving up our personal will, like surrendering to something greater. Does that make sense? What I mean by that? Giving up personal will, giving over, let's say.
For what?
For what?
Yeah, like in exchange for what?
In
Anything? I don't get the statement, I guess.
So I'm saying there's something that's really great about this worldview, that, and this is like one way to capture it. So one thing that's great about the integrated worldview is that we're developing, we're growing, we're becoming more conscious. One great thing about this worldview is that like there's the freedom of giving over your personal will. So you're always like wanting whatever thing for your life, and you're like always unhappy because you don't have it, basically. And as this thing that doesn't have, you're kind of like in the feeling of not having it. It's painful. There's suffering. There's a kind of constriction that you don't even notice until there's the moment where you like, and I think everyone has actually had this experience, like whether it's in like sports or singing or at a concert or on drugs or surfing or being in the water or something or meditating, whatever. There's some experience of like suddenly the your own personal self. We've probably all had this in circling, actually. I don't know why I'm making this like really general, like talking about just circlers. But yeah, we've almost all had this in circling. In some ways, circling is geared towards this. Like you have your own personal identity and you relational system, or you include the wholeness of like the relational system in the room, the interconnectivity. And you can see that personal will is like such a small piece in this like vast, complex cosmos. And there's something that's like totally awe-inspiring about it. Does that make sense?
In that, the word that comes to mind is flow.
Yeah.
And that flow state, it's like I've lost my sense of self in that whole, the thing is unfolding. I am definitely part of it, but my sense of self in it's not the salient fact.
Exactly. Flow is a great word for it. It's better than getting over a personal will. Thank you. So yeah, there's a sense of flow. And I think too much flow in the extreme becomes the tyranny of surrender. And I could actually, I think Tyranny of Surrender sounds really cool, so we're going to stick with it. I could say the tyranny of flow. I could say the tyranny of order, the tyranny of objectivity, the tyranny of equality, the tyranny of development, or whatever. I could do the tyranny of whatever. We could say this is surrender. The tyranny of surrender is when you think that like surrender's not big enough to hold your personal will and include it. So you give it up entirely. You give over your identity or your personality or your I-ness. You kind of squash it in service of this greater flow.
Isn't that kind of the same what you were describing as communiterialism, but just with yourself, like conforming or giving up, kind of losing as I explained it.
Yeah, I think there's a real similarity. There's like an echo or an octave or a harmonic in a
But
way.
then what's the difference?
I think the difference is that this, if we have enough community, which is basically an external solution, if we have enough
Okay.
inclusion, whatever, in a way, this is an internal solution. If we have enough flow, all of our problems will be solved. If we have enough, if I have enough letting go of my needs into this like greater trust of God's will, or I'm trying to think of a more impersonal. If we didn't use the word God, if I just let go to like being guided by the universe, or if I'm in like total non-attachment, and I'm just in this state of like witnessing the unfolding of being and like my being as it, and I just don't.
No, I was going to the lab, like if we have enough, so you're basically going to say that. But not if we have enough tyranny of surrender, but if we have enough surrender,
Yeah.
all our problems.
All the problems are going to be solved.
What's wrong?
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong is just like any of the other ones. Eventually, it's like you fill up your cup and it overflows. Like, that's one positive way to say
Sounds
it.
like enlightenment from Buddhism, though.
It reminds me of some movie I watched that I told you about years ago about this guy who like went to a cave and meditated and got so released and deep that bugs were eating his skin and he didn't even notice.
Right.
Remember, and you were
Yeah.
like, I don't want bugs eating my skin, because that was like, I thought that should be my goal.
Right.
And you were like, I don't want bugs eating my skin. And I was like, I don't either. I want my skin.
Right. There's a kind of confusion of like somehow like letting bugs eat my skin is more enlightened than not letting bugs eat my skin. But like that doesn't fit logically. If I'm so unattached that I can let bugs eat my skin, I should also be able to be unattached to not let bugs eat my skin.
Right.
Unattachment is the same. Like in the Enlightenment traditions, it's like there's one saying, it's like you give up the king's robes for monk's robes, but you're still attached to robes.
Only in the lower, in the Hinayana.
Go on. It sounds like you know more maybe distinctions than I do.
The idea is that everything, both like my skin or the bug skin, is all the same. So the moment we actually don't see a difference, then it doesn't matter.
Right, whether you kill them or you let them eat you, it doesn't matter because they're the same. But if you're prioritizing letting go so much that they eat you, you're not really seeing it as
Exactly.
the same. But if you're thinking of it as I need more surrender, this equals surrender, you might not actually be surrendering. There's a paradox there
Right.
that you short circuit.
Right.
Like a living death.
So tyranny of surrender would be more like the Hinayana version.
I don't know the term.
I think that's right.
The lower vehicle, which is just like you surrendering, but not everything surrendering.
I think that's right. So yeah, now I'm remembering my studies of Buddhism, and there's basically like in the same way as like most people here probably grew up in like American Western culture, and you realize like there's a bunch of different like versions of Christianity. Similarly, there's like a bunch of different versions of Buddhism, and like one tradition says that like at a certain point, like there was basically the Buddha, the Dharma that Gautama Buddha gave, and then a few hundred years later, Nagarjuna came along and was like, wait, hold on, like you're basically privileging emptiness. It's actually the equivalent to the tyranny of surrender, but it's the opposite side of the coin. Like, explain it. So like if like the head side of the coin, or like, yeah, if you have the yin yang, this is a great symbol. You have like flow on one side. This is like you're involved in the world, and it's like you're getting these messages from God, and like you're moving and blah blah. The other side would be like emptiness, and that's nothing means anything, and bugs are eating my skin. Like, and it's not nothing means anything in a nihilistic way. It's nothing means anything in like a body like awakening to like a kind of fundamental like ephemeral quality of reality itself. Like, so like it basically, if I realize that like reality is constantly in motion, like one way of understanding this is that like there's nothing real there. It's constantly growing and decaying, like birthing and dying. The other version is like, oh, it's constantly in process, so I'm constantly riding a wave, constantly surfing the wave of consciousness. Does that make sense? So yeah, this is really cool. Like you could have the tyranny of surrender could be in the flow side, on the like the form side, or it could be the tyranny of non-attachment, which is on the emptiness side. But it'd be the same kind of thing.
Kind of like flow is like meaning, and emptiness is
Yeah.
release of meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
The tyranny part of it is the lack of choice.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a kind of a false view. So like, because like, here, maybe some examples. Maybe this, my previous thinking sometimes is better than my in the moment thinking. This is one of the things. Like, I had my own little tyranny of surrender for like many years. It's like I've got to like just be in the room, like with people, like interacting, and I'm just gonna have like a general topic, maybe not even have a topic, and I'm gonna like just start speaking, and like cool stuff's gonna come, and it did come, and it was really fun, and a lot of you were at the sessions, and like, and it was great. But then I was like, actually, I noticed that it goes better when I plan. There's like obvious thing that like most humans know that I had like given up my tyranny of surrender. And like, and there's always like the moderation side is like there was something I learned, and like or we talked about the dialectic in the past. There was like the thesis was like I gotta plan my talk. The antithesis was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna show up and be present with everybody and like let my being pull through and be inspired by God. And then the synthesis is some version of like, yeah, like I'm gonna have my plan, and then we're gonna see where we go and what happens in the room. I'm willing to change it at any time, drop it at any time, but I'm also willing to pick it up at any time. So I'm going to pick it up right now. The tyranny of surrender in a circle is when you have something that you want, or you want something to be different, but you're kind of just like waiting.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like hopefully it'll change maybe. But you're like, oh, I'm so surrendered, but actually you're just the irony is that you're not surrendered to your desire, to your wanting. You're not willing to include that and face the vulnerability of maybe being told no, or face the vulnerability of setting a boundary in a circle, like with a bunch of people who are like just want to be in flow and just want to say yes to everything, and like, and it's easier to like say, well, to like keep that boundary to yourself and say like, fuck it, these people are like weird and they're not my people and I'm going to leave, than to like be like, wait, there's something I love about this, but there's something that's not quite right, and let me like bring it in and like see if I can change the space. So that's the leadership side. That's what we, another way I see this kind of tyranny of surrender is like an unwillingness to compromise. So I've got my truth, and this is just what's true for me, and it's not going to be any other way. Which again, like I don't think any of this is like inherent in circling. It's just kind of habits that we accidentally, cut deeper grooves in because for whatever reason, maybe we haven't heard this talk yet. Should I say more about that, or is that pretty clear?
That's clear.
Unwillingness to compromise in relationship. So one thing is like, if you're like, oh, I just got to surrender to this, or this is the truth, a lot of times it's like obfuscating precision. It's obfuscating something. Like I often have clear requirements in a relationship. I've got I'm more and more clear with these over time. Like, I don't know, my work, like I love the freedom in circling that we can like raise our voices at times and this and that. But actually, like when I'm in a working relationship, like yelling is not okay with me. I just don't. I don't want to have. I can't actually be at my best flow working wise if that's requirement isn't met. But that doesn't mean that like I don't know. It'd be easy to like I don't know how to say it, but it's like you can bring a lot more like differentiation. Like if you're like, man, I have these 5 requirements, then you're also saying everything else is good to go. Like it's all the other stuff is workable. Here are my the things I have to have, or I'm going to walk away, and pretty much everything else I'm willing to compromise on. And I think that's actually healthy and good. So yeah, the Tyranny of Surrender. One time, back in my Tyranny of Surrender days, as if I'm like past this, I was in a circle, and this person was like really into psychodrama, and so they were like this one woman like had something going on, and the psychodrama person was like, oh, we need to like build a coffin for this woman and like put her in this like fake coffin. Like I don't even remember if she used pillows, but it was like this like imaginary coffin. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like this feels super weird and like off and wrong. But I was like, oh, my protest has to come from like my deepest surrender. So like stood up, and I'm like watching this like this, and I'm like feeling my belly, and I'm like, and then I'm like, I have to own my experience, and I'm like, I feel uncomfortable in my belly watching you build that coffin. And now I think I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah, Tyranny of Surrender. I think a lot of it's just excluding your own personal will, like as if surrender isn't big enough. Like I like the word God, so I use it. I know some people aren't that happy with it. So you can just like substitute in something like the divinity, or like what matters most in my own experience that's like bigger than me, and we'll just like let God stand for that. So like if we're like surrendering to God, it's like as if God's will isn't big enough to include my own. It's like the irony of that, once you see it, is like astounding. Like the arrogance of it is pretty astounding. Like questioning everything, like an unwillingness to like make any firm commitments or stands. I think that's evidence of the tyranny of surrender. Here's one that I've been thinking about recently. It's like basically like following emotions unquestioningly that are based on bad beliefs. So like in a typical circling space, which none of us are in typical circling spaces, we're like way more involved in that. People sometimes like privilege, like, well, emotions are just like obviously better than thoughts, right? And like stories are bad and stuff. And so we shouldn't talk about stories or analyze things. And the problem with that is that sometimes like I might be like really upset with you because, you know, I'm assuming that when you put your hand like this, it means that like you hate me and have told me I'm like a bad person. And then I'm like, well, I just have a right to be angry, and I need to feel this anger and like sit with it and like figure out like why my anger is like related to like how, you know, my dad never got angry with me as a kid or something. And like actually I could just check and be like, wait, what's happening over there? And like question the belief, right? Or people have all sorts of weird beliefs like woven in together. So like I don't know, like sometimes people will be like, oh, like I'm afraid of being successful, and like as if that's an explanation. But like categorically successful, you shouldn't be afraid of it, right? Like the definition of it is essentially, so there's something else like wonky happening as well. One example, a close friend of mine, we discovered where like he was like, oh, if I'm successful, I am gonna get shot down. So he wasn't afraid of success. He was afraid of getting shot down. And he could sit with his fear for like decades, and he would never find out that the emotion was based on a bad belief. That like, and it wasn't. We had to go deeper, right? Like the fear of being shot down was because in his mind he was responsible for the success, and like, but when we actually looked at it, it was like, how many doors was he walking through that was open for him? And like, yeah, he walked through them, but like, he didn't open the door. He opened the door. Exactly. So like when you start to like feel that and embody that, it was like, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of because I'm actually not really responsible for the success. There's no reason for anyone to shoot me down. And if they try to shoot me down, they're also engaging in this really dumb belief that like somehow I could arrange like all of the world to like make me successful, and most of it was like pure luck. So like, yeah, the tyranny of surrender sometimes I think is like emotions are primary when they're not. Like emotions give us a lot of good information, and sometimes we gotta like focus on beliefs. Sometimes we gotta focus on sensations. One more thing about the tyranny of surrender, and we could talk more about the tyranny of non-attachment, which I think would be super interesting. But I think sometimes we get in following the whims of the pre-personal.
The what?
The whims of the pre-personal. So like because like this, like usually you're surrendering your personal identity, your personal sense of like wants and needs to like this greater thing, like wow, in the flow of like everything, but like without including this kind of discernment, you end up accidentally or often letting in these kind of pre-personal, like basic animal instincts kind of run the show. So like in a circle, it's like, oh yeah, well, we have to be with this thing that somebody's in, or I have to be with this thing in me, which is like actually maybe just a totally like a thing that's from, I don't know, like it's me as a baby, or like me just like, I'm just trying to, I can't think of any examples at the moment, but do you guys know what I mean? No, not yet?
No.
So
Surrender to a less mature part of yourself.
Exactly.
And surrender to a more evolved part of yourself.
exactly. So when you're letting go, so if we said like, if I was like, there's like, shit, color. I don't have the blue. If you're like, okay, I have like a pre-personal, a personal, and like a kind of transpersonal. We're trying to like surrender the personal to the transpersonal, but like this is basically like what Justin was saying is like this. There's like a scale of like maturity that which you could say is like inclusiveness or wisdom that like goes this way. So you're trying to actually step into something more mature, and you might, without realizing it, like be actually surrendering into something less mature. And you confuse it because it doesn't look, it's not personal. Which is also fine. Like I have a huge like opening, and we need to like explore and welcome these pre-personal energies as well. But it just requires a different context. And like I've made the mistake of being in this kind of like the tyranny of surrender, like having a pre-personal thing come up, or like, I don't know, like be like feeling some like aggression or something, like being violent, and sharing it with somebody, assuming they kind of knew that it was in this like wider container that like I'm obviously, like I was on, a good example of mine is I was online, and I was like, yeah, something in me wants to like lovingly like hit you in the face. So in my world, I'm like, obviously I'm not going to hit this person, like we're like thousands of miles away. But like I was essentially kind of surrendering to this like pre-personal aggression or violence. And this person had no idea that that's what was happening, and there was no context for it. And so they were really upset by it, and left and never came back to our online circling platform. So yeah, that's one of the, like, I think that was a mistake on my part. It wasn't clear. I didn't make it clear this is a thing that I'm exploring in me, that I'm trying to get more awareness and choice over, which is then fine if I own it and hold it, or they know that's happening. Or if I actually want to be violent, that might be a different story as well. And there's certainly cases for that. I can imagine situations where I want to like tackle somebody who's stolen my wallet, or like stop somebody from attacking someone I love. You know, like that's fine to like welcome those pre-personal energies and have them more available. But it's again like this, just a clarity on context. All right, we are a few minutes over the talk section. Any questions? Any comments? Any more? Good, happy. Okay. My closing words are what to do is in this kind of becoming aware, making a choice, is to really be gentle with yourselves. My least favorite thing, one of my least favorite things that you could do with this would be to like tell other people they're bad for whatever reason using this map. Don't do that. But I think it would be just as bad if you told yourself that you were bad for somewhere being like stuck or being in like some sort of communiterialism or growthism or tyranny of surrender. Like I've made every single one of these mistakes, and I'm sure I'm going to continue to make every single one of these mistakes.
I was just thinking about this. This is interesting because there's a part of this which is noticing that everything is okay. Like I had this fundamental thought that I can't really be disconnected from the universe. Everything that happens is happening. There's something like if I'm not connected to the impact that I'm having, that's a choice that it's like, oh, I'm missing something. If I'm not noticing, oh yeah, there's something, it's something. I just stick with the world is the way it is. If you don't like it, tough. You know. There's something in it that feels missing in there. So there's an interesting kind of that's where I get past my making, trying to make myself wrong, make other people wrong. It's like, oh, something happens and I'm impacted by that. I notice what the impact is. Like, there's something that continues that looking. It's the choice it's the place where I always find a choice.
Yeah. So I'd say the closing words are like being gentle with yourself around anything you notice, and then just like you're saying, the noticing itself, like let's celebrate that. That is our bias. That's our like kind of moderation. Or when I write some other, I don't know, probably should peg it somewhere in this map, but like. Yeah, like let's celebrate the noticing, because that's where awareness comes in, and that's where you do get to choose. And then when you do, you can choose to and be any one of those things, but it's different. It's lit up. It's vivacious. It's meaningful and playful and empty at the same time. And I think that's what we're trying to practice in circling as well. It's like, yeah, get that choice, and then if you want, re-embody. If you don't want to, then don't as well. That's totally fine. And there's a kind of joy to living in that awareness and in that celebration. And there's a kind of joy in choosing whatever it is and being aware of like, oh yeah, I'm like totally making you wrong and wanting to shame you. And then I'm feeling ashamed about wanting to shame you. And then there's a kind of like amazement at living with this kind of awareness. And I think that's what I really want to cultivate. So now, Eric, if you can start the slow clap. That's so unfair. Thank you. That's it for today. We'll start up the more practicey session in 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah.
I brought a birthday cake to share if anybody wants it.
Happy birthday.
Do you want me to offer some happy birthday to you?
Yeah.